So before I introduce myself, I want to say that I have cheated and done something really traditional in giving a talk, which is to split it into 3 parts. If you've watched the Steve Jobs commencement address, he says, I'm going to tell you 3 stories. So I'm totally ripping off Steve Jobs. The title of my talk is How to Start Up, How to Drop Out, and How to Get By in the Real World, Launching a Startup from Princeton. So hopefully, if I do my talk right, by the end you will learn how to do all of those things and you can go out and do it tomorrow. Dean Avens will shoot me because I will have told all of you to drop out. Just kidding. So my name is Catharine Bellinger. I am Princeton class of 2013, formerly class of 2012. If you talk to the Dean of the Woodrow Wilson School, I'm class of 20 never. So don't please be surprised yet. Publicly confess that on video. So I left Princeton after my junior year to turn a club that I started on campus called Students for Education Reform from a student group into a national nonprofit. In the past 18 months, we've grown from 1 campus to 20 campuses to 136 campuses, from a full-time staff of 0 to a full-time staff of 18, from a Princeton college-funded budget to a budget of $4.1 million. It has been an incredibly wild ride that is primarily due to being in the right place at the right time, but more importantly due to the incredible work done by the students who are involved in our organization. Along the way, though, I have gotten some really great advice from mentors. Hopefully I'm going to try to distill that into my talk. So part 1 is how to start up. It was summer 2010, and I was living in New York City, interning for a nonprofit with my best friend, Alexis Morin, who's also the co-founder of Students for Education Reform. And we were going about our daily life interning when we got an email that was probably the most shocking email I've ever seen, where some rich Connecticut donor was emailing his friends saying, have you heard of these girls at Princeton? They started Students for Education Reform. It's a club that gets college students engaged with combating educational inequity in our K-12 schools. And we were looking at this email that someone had forwarded to us and trying to figure out how this rich person in Connecticut had possibly heard about our club in Princeton that meets in McCosh 40. So we looked at this email, and it turned out that someone had told this donor that we had started a club and he was interested in getting in touch with us. So we wrote back and said, we'd love to talk to you. We got on the phone with him. His name's John Southler. He now sits on our board. He said, what would it take to turn your club into a nonprofit that can actually help other students start clubs across the country? And we said, it's funny you should ask. We've actually been planning something similar. We just weren't planning to start a nonprofit to do it. And he said, well, if you can come up with a budget, I will help you get started. So we asked him for the largest sum of money that we'd ever asked for in our entire lives. We asked him for $13,000. We were going to start a nonprofit and expand nationally on this $13,000 budget. So Alexis and I spent our junior year with Claire, who's here tonight, and with a number of other Princeton students, calling from our dorm rooms students at other colleges and tweeting at them and Facebooking them and asking them if they wanted to start branches of our nonprofit. But the real lesson I realized, the sort of frenzy of calling other students and trying to launch this organization during our junior year was that we had made a promise. So John, this generous guy in Connecticut who was really excited about young people getting involved in educational equity, had made a promise that he was going to support us with his resources. And we had made a promise back that we were going to do our best work every single day to spread our idea across the country. And what I have learned is that those promises that you make to people when you're starting up a company or a nonprofit, whether it's to your co-founder or to your board member or to your first donor, those early promises are what keep you going every single day. So you have your self-motivation, but it's the early promises that really provide accountability for you to grow. So at the end of our junior year, Alexis and I received an offer to be incubated at a venture philanthropy, which is sort of like a venture fund but for nonprofits. So we spent our summer internship working full-time out of this venture philanthropy in San Francisco. And the best part about San Francisco is when you're out in San Francisco and you tell people, I'm in college and I'm working on this nonprofit, they say to you, oh my gosh, why are you letting your studies interfere with your nonprofit? Whereas if you're on the East Coast, the people say, oh my goodness, why are you letting your nonprofit interfere with your studies? So we were out in San Francisco and everyone was telling us the time is now. So that gets us to part 2, which is how to drop out. So the easy answer to that is if you want to drop out and do it well, don't. If you leave college and leave all of your friends, you will eventually realize that you have left not just house parties and deck parties and lawn parties and Tuesday parties and like every single party, toga party imaginable, but you're also leaving your peers and your professors and the really awesome idea that you had for a senior thesis, a really cute boy in your Latin class, and I still talk to him actually. But you're also leaving all the lessons that you're supposed to learn in college. You're leaving those, and you're going to have to then go off and learn those in the real world, which is a much higher stakes environment. So the easy answer to dropping out and doing it well is to do it. By the time that I realized all of the things that I left behind, it was reunions weekend 2012, and I was standing on the sidelines as all of my classmates were running onto Poe Field, like 2012, and I realized that I was 2013. I was standing on the sidelines with this really full email inbox and a board meeting the next week, and a lease with my like live-in boyfriend that I like probably was too young to have, and all of these lessons that I was learning in the real world, and my peers were there like running onto Poe Field, and they'd had this year of an incredibly safe space senior year to screw up, and basically there are no consequences because you're a college student. But if you are 150% in love with your idea and you can't see yourself waking up in the morning and doing any other thing other than working on your startup, and you realize that there is a window of opportunity, don't let people force you into changing your passions or like putting your passion on hold, because at the end of the day, like all of the best startups did come at the right time. Like there was a window, and if someone tells you, oh, just wait and like wait a year or wait 2 years or wait 3 years, the window will pass. So this year I have seen some really incredible Princetonians who did leave college. Josh Miller, who left to do a tech startup. Alexis and I had the good fortune to leave and do a nonprofit startup. We all had something in common, which is that at the time we left, there was this window of opportunity. And sometimes it's donors who understand, or investors who are going to give you the seed money you need, or sometimes it's the co-founders and founding team you need to take your idea from a business plan into reality. But there is a window, and there is a time when you realize that you can't write your senior thesis, or you can't go to your lecture class. The only thing that you can do is work full-time on your idea. And when that time comes, you realize that now is your window of opportunity. The only thing that you can do is find a bunch of people who care about you as a person, because what's about to happen is you're about to spend like every single day the rest of your life on your idea, and everyone you talk to, and everyone you meet, and all of the donors, all of the people you hire, and all of the people you put on your board, they're going to be really excited about your idea. But if you're taking time off from college, eventually you're going to need this group of people where the only thing that they care about is you, because at some point you're going to have to go back. I know that like Mark Zuckerberg and Steve Jobs left and they like made billions and millions of dollars, but most of us are not going to do that, especially if anyone is launching a nonprofit startup. So at the end of the day, you need these people who are going to actually, usually they're your parents, Sometimes it's your best friend, sometimes it is your aunt, sometimes it's someone at Princeton, but someone who's going to sit you down and actually make you write down a plan, sign it in blood for how you're going to graduate, because otherwise you just won't. And the reason that you won't is if you've surrounded yourself with all of these people who care about your ideas and they care about how your idea is going to succeed, then the accountability that you've created for yourself and the promises that you've made are all about your ideas and succeeding in your ideas, but not about succeeding for yourself or taking care of yourself. So find people who are going to make you go to college. That's how to drop out. Part 3 is how to get by in the real world, which really it just for parallel structure, how to start up, how to drop out, how to get by in the real world. I needed another prepositional phrase. But also, I think that if any of you are in the Princeton E-Club or any of you are working on a startup, the only thing that you're ever thinking about is your startup. But you're not going to actually be good at your job and good at running your company if you have no clue how to get by in the real world. Most people in college, especially at Princeton, have never filed taxes or signed a lease or made themselves go get a gym membership and actually go to the gym because Dylan is 5 steps away. It's a lot easier. So the how to get by in the real world part, especially for CEOs, is the most difficult thing that you will do. That's because if you start up while you're in college, you're skipping the part in your life where you're supposed to learn how to take care of yourself. So you skip the learning how to take care of yourself and you go right immediately into being a CEO and taking care of other people. And so what you're responsible for is your $4 million budget and your 15 full-time staff and making sure they get their paychecks and making sure they pay their rent. But suddenly you're not responsible for taking care of yourself anymore. So my number one piece of advice from anyone who's launching a startup and anyone who's dropping out of school to do it, or even just doing it from Princeton, is immediately go and look at your insurance plan and go and get a therapist. So I know that this is
Yes.
baffling. Most college students, when I was at Princeton, I had no idea that therapy was this thing that you could do. You can also call it management coaching. That's what, if you're a CEO, that's what they'll tell you it is. Oh, you have a management coach. And that person's just your therapist. But yeah, tell your board, tell your parents that you are really going to take care of yourself and you want a management coach or you want a therapist. And literally go once a week and stop thinking about the people who you have to pay and the people whose rent you care about and the organization whose metrics and goals and data you're in charge of. And stop thinking about your board materials and go and just talk about learning how to take care of yourself. And because if you start up and you drop out when you're really young, you don't know how to get by in the real world. The only way you're going to do it is if you actually calendar it in. This is the one time each week I'm going to learn how to do this. So Claire, my amazing director of program, is here, and she told me, Catherine, you cannot end your talk by telling people that they need to go to therapy. It's so depressing. The only people who are going to laugh are the adults in the room. The only people who think this is funny are the adults. The 18-year-olds don't fucking tell them to go to therapy. They've never been to therapy. They don't have, their problems are in their dorm rooms, not in the real world. But I actually think that this is the real thing about startups that Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg and all these famous people are not talking about, which is that CEOs don't know how to take care of themselves. And you see it, you read the Steve Jobs biography, it's this incredibly exciting story about a company, but it's also this really sad and tragic story about someone who didn't know how to take care of themselves. So I'm going to end on a little bit of a sad note, which is just, or I guess an uplifting note, which is if you do start up and drop out, you should also do your best effort to learn how to get by in the real world because it's actually really fun and really fulfilling, and it will allow you to better achieve the goals for your startup.